here with Glen Levett to speak about his new EP, Infiltration. I have a few questions for you, Glen, to kind of give your listeners some context about this new project.
Sure.
So, how would you describe the songs that you write and record?
Well, generally they're Christian in nature, in terms of, you know, they have semi-autobiographical lyrics about the ups and downs of life as a Christian, you know, in this world, you know, looking at some of the honest issues, but you know, knowing that God is the ultimate solution to it all. A lot of the lyrics are quite big picture, in nature, sort of looking the world kind of holistically, but they're not worship songs. Obviously there's a lot of great, you know, artists out there doing really good worship songs, you know, good composers and producers of them and performers of them, you know. Although the odd song does come close to being more worshipful, I guess. I've done a few projects now, you know, a few albums worth of this kind of stuff now, since about 2005. So, yeah, I just love still doing it. And, you know, I just like to do something that's a bit different, that kind of minds the gap, if you will, sort of in between kind of some of the sounds of secular pop and rock music, but the kind of sounds of contemporary Christian music. Somewhere in between, I guess, in terms of sound, but maybe closer to the sort of secular kind of pop rock styles, with the odd other influence creeping in, like funk or maybe hard rock, or maybe something might be slightly jazzy or folky or something like that. You know, sort of variations sort of within the pop rock arena of the sort of secular sounds. More of, you know, kind of like 80s kind of sounds, not so much, you know, what we get now, but I don't know, there's so many subcategories and sub-variants of everything. It becomes more and more hard to tell, I find.
I know you're a big fan of developments across the recording life of different artists. How do you see that your style and message have evolved since your last recording?
Well, the last one was an EP called Restoration, which I released kind of, it was very much coming out of 2019 really, but sort of released it right at the beginning of 20. So not too long before the pandemic came, but musically I don't think they're too dissimilar, although there are differences, but I wanted a nice balance of, you know, keyboards and guitars, and I think it was good to have a bit more acoustic guitar on this one than that previous one, but there's still hopefully some funky parts and some, you know, slightly soul-y parts, but this is the kind of usual sort of thing I try to bring, like where each song is quite different but hopefully unified enough to have a general unified sound. That's a very tricky balance.
So what about the message?
Well, lyrically, I guess, yeah, that's probably where Infiltration differs more from Restoration, more than it does on the music side. I mean, I do try to make it that every song does sound a bit different anyway in every project, but musically the two probably aren't too far apart, but lyrically they probably are further apart, because with Restoration I felt like lyrically a lot of that was about inner healing from certain things, and you know, which we all, you know, need those messages at some point or another, and I'd needed those sort of in the previous couple of years to when I was doing Restoration, which was 18, 19 when I actually really did it, because since then we had the pandemic, and of course it's a bit like thinking of before the war and after the war to a degree, so somebody said to me the other day, and I totally see what they mean. During the pandemic I moved to London, I relocated to London, and to do a music production course, which I completed, which was great. To me, a lot of the lyrical themes in Infiltration are coming out of the dealing with the pandemic, me having relocated to London, me having, you know, met my now wife April, who I married just a few months ago, in October. Although actually, one of the tracks, Dare to Redeem, does hark back more to maybe some of the themes that sort of inform my Restoration lyrics more, because it's, yeah, that's going back a bit to the sort of inner healing, or rather the idea that your present self could ever go back to help your past self in some way. I find some of the lines of that one quite emotional. But apart from that, I would say Infiltration is quite outward looking. It's not all about me. It's never all about me. On a certain level, sometimes the lyrics are personal, but they could also be taken to be quite general as well. Sometimes they're quite multi-layered. Sometimes somebody could take them to be quite holistic and even be able to apply, hopefully be able to apply to themselves in some way.
So tell us about the title of the EP.
Well, Infiltration, yeah. It is really just referring to the fact that I'm a country guy who relocated to London of all places. I mean, there was one time when I lived in the Lake District, so who could have ever imagined I would end up in London? To me, only God can do that kind of arc. But that I could hopefully just bring something different to the norm here, you know, in a healthy way, just bring a different perspective. I think it's infiltration in that sense, and the whole idea that as Christians we need to all infiltrate in a sense. We're not of this world. We're infiltrating to bring something of God's kingdom into a world that can be amazing, but is somewhat broken, and who knows what's going to happen next in it.
How has the music of the artists that you really love informed the music that you've produced for Infiltration?
Well, a bit like with the past projects, really, not so different in that way. I really, love a variety of sounds within the pop rock arena, and I like, a big range of artists and bands. Basically, I don't know, people like Rush and Sting and Chicago and probably Elton John. One of the ideas I took in a way was for the first track. Which is called Only a Matter of Time, and that starts off with a sort of nylon string acoustic intro and then ends with a nylon string acoustic outro, funnily enough. And so that's an idea I took from one of my favourite bands, Rush. They did such a thing on their 1977 album, A Farewell to Kings, on the title track, and I actually took that idea from that. So it's things like that, and I think there's a few bars, I think, in the chorus of the second track, Shot in the Dark, where I think I sound a bit like Sting. But maybe that's just my idea, I don't know. I do love to hear these different influences come in. There's always going to be people who are a lot more gifted at these things than you, but I love it when I hear those certain influences and think, oh great, that does sound like such and such or such and such. Every time I record a project, I do hear quite a few of my favourite influences within the stuff that I do, and I just love bringing that into Christian music.
You seem to explore a lot of different sounds across the EP. How do you arrive at this final sound world for each song?
Well, as I've maybe already said, I like every song to be different enough, for the whole thing to feel unique going right through the course of the EP or whatever. I do like to strike a sort of a balance between the technological and the acoustic. I like having acoustic elements and I like having technological elements. I love that thing of bringing, digital and analog together in a soundscape, and seeing how well I can kind of marry them in a way, bring them together, but in a way that hopefully works well for each individual track.
How do you build a track? Do you start with a melody or do you start with the chord sequence? How do you build it up? Because the tracks are quite richly layered.
Yeah, it is a layers affair. Yeah, because it's not some band playing live in the room. I kind of make it sound like it's a band, but I'm generally playing everything. I start usually with a drum track. On about half of the EP, they are preset rhythms, but on the other half, on two and a bit of the songs, I did actually program the drum rhythms myself from sounds that were already in the digital audio workstation software that we use for recording music. That there are various ones of those. But for one of the tracks called If You Will Be My Guide, on which actually my wife April, she actually guests on violin, that was actually all created upon a rhythm generated by a canal boat very near where we live here in East London, and I asked April one day to actually just record a sample of this canal boat as we walked along, and I wanted to see what I could do with it, and so then I cut this sample from it and had it looping round, going round and round in a loop, and it generated a kind of a 5/4 rhythm. But like with all the other tracks, the rest is the same, where I would put the bass instruments on, whether that be bass guitar and bass synth or one or the other, and then generally probably synth parts, keyboard parts, and then guitar parts. For that one it was just electric, no acoustic, but some tracks have acoustic on. I really wanted to bring the nylon string acoustic into this project, so that's on 3 of the tracks, but 3 of the other ones, not that one. And then vocals, harmonising with myself, double tracking, octavizing. Sometimes you're singing a low octave and a high octave. I've been doing that since my first Christian project, Survival to the Harvest, which I recorded in late 2005, early 2006, brought out just after I turned 30. That was recorded when I was 29, and now I'm 46, so that's how much I love doing this whole thing.
What do you hope that listeners will take away from this EP?
Well, I mean, obviously all the lyrics, I will have meant them in a certain way. I had something in mind, whether it be something more personal or something more holistic and sort of about the world, about some of the problems we have and frustrations we can have, and some of those little darknesses, where we need to take a shot in the dark or whatever, and the solutions that God brings. Not talking, in detail about those, but talking about them from a high level in a way, because they're not folk songs. They're not folky at all in that way. They're not folk lyrics. They're sort of very big picture, which is kind of the opposite in a way. What people would take away. I mean, obviously. Yeah, I just hope everyone hears them on their own level, and is able to take something away for themselves. They'll know what they will apply to it. They won't be thinking of what I think of when I write the lyrics, but hopefully they can take something away that will help them, to be encouraged in the journey that we walk and the path that we walk, as Christians. But in this world where we're not of the world, but we are in the world, so we can take all of the really good influences of great music, and why should the enemy have any of that? I think God should have all the great music, whatever shapes and forms it has, and I just love to do my own particular thing that's different to anyone else. It's funny, every now and then somebody will say to me, when they hear one of my songs, they'll say, "Oh, it's different," and I'm thinking, well, good, I hope it is different.